Hello everybody, how's it going? Welcome to D&D Optimized, the show where each week we take a deep dive into one, sometimes two specific character builds for Dungeons & Dragons 5e, and we do our best to theorycraft about them, crunch numbers, and basically try to make them as powerful as possible for the role that we've chosen for that character to play in-game. If you enjoy creating characters in Dungeons & Dragons almost as much as you enjoy actually playing the game, then welcome home. This is where you belong, and I'm really grateful that you're here, so thanks. My name's Colby, and I'll be your host, and welcome. Just got back from vacation. It was fantastic. Thanks for asking. And yeah, just really excited to be back and to jump into another episode. I missed you guys. So don't forget, of course, if you like the content, please like and subscribe, and maybe even think about joining. There should be a join button right around there. It's not very expensive, and it does a lot to help support us, and you get some kind of okay little perks. So thanks for those who are members and for those who are considering becoming such. Let's see. I'm probably going to be hitting 10,000 subscribers in the next week sometime, it looks like. So watch out for the little celebratory episode we're going to do. That's the gauntlet I've been talking about, where me and some of my friends pick a build that we've done in the past, and we're going to play against a series of monsters and probably die. Thanks to you guys who voted that apparently we're now fighting two beholders for one of those rounds, so thank you very much. It's going to be a short fight, I'm worried. Anyway, let us jump into this week's episode. So, starting off, as always, with a bit of a preamble. Oh crap! Oh, thank goodness he put those timestamps in. Skip. No, don't skip. This is important. So, okay. Some of you like to argue that tanks in Dungeons & Dragons are dumb. And by tank, of course, we mean someone who is hard to kill, right? It's more than that, but that's what most of us think of, when we think about tanks. The argument is the best way to really help your team is not by being durable. It is by killing enemies as quickly as possible or controlling them and things like that. I think there's definitely merit to that argument. But I think, more importantly, some people, myself included, actually, really have a lot of fun playing a character who is really hard to kill and focuses on protecting their allies in combat, and drawing enemy fire as much as they can in combat. And at the end of the day, we're not here to tell you the right way to have fun. We're here to try and take a character concept that is fun for you, hopefully, and a lot of other people, and make it as powerful as possible, right? And that's not exactly the same thing. So not only that, but the tank builds that I do, especially lately, tend to do really well, like viewership-wise. So that tells me that there is a pretty big appetite for these kinds of character builds out there. The wizard tank, the armor are among two of my most popular ever videos. So, and I enjoy them, and I enjoy making them, and most of you seem to as well. For the rest of you, I would ask you to keep an open mind. So let's review, what makes a good tank in Dungeons & Dragons, because again, there's durability. The durability aspect is important, but maybe more important is finding a way to protect your allies, right? And I would argue that aspect, that, protecting your allies aspect is really kind of more important than just being survivable. Anyway, there are a lot of ways to do that, to protect your allies, right? You can throw out control options, much like I did with my Bear Totem Barbarian, and the Paladin tank build that I did a while ago that kind of focused a little bit more on finding ways to kind of offer some control options. Of course, encouraging your enemies to either attack you and or discouraging them from attacking your friends is another very important aspect to being a good tank, right? And we call those, for those who don't know, we call those abilities taunts or soft taunts. And that's really more a throwback to like the MMO style games like World of Warcraft and things. But anyway, trying to encourage your enemies to attack you, draw their fire, help discourage them from attacking your friends, that kind of thing. Very important aspect to being a tank. A third would be providing some sort of shield or absorption aspect to the damage that an ally may take from an enemy. If you can't convince the enemy to attack you, at least maybe soften the blow on your friends. That's another way to help protect them. There are others. The problem with all of those protect your allies aspects to the game is that they are very difficult to quantify. And as you guys know, I really like to quantify things. And so, that is the main reason why I do damage reports on our survivability is because A, it's important to be survivable, especially if you're drawing enemy fire to yourself, right? But B, it's just a lot easier to quantify. But please, with that said, don't ever lose sight of the fact that a good tank has to do more than just be hard to kill, right? Because if that's all you are, is just very durable, there's a pretty decent chance that your dungeon master or, well, the monsters will just ignore you, right? And then your superior survivability isn't doing anyone any good. So keep that in mind whenever you are trying to create a tank character. Now, I've learned some things as I've been making tank builds over the last few months. One, a high armor class is generally better for damage mitigation and survivability than damage resistance is, or even lots of hit points. If you have to choose between those, being able to soak damage and resist damage or have a high armor class, most of the time, for most monsters, for most of the damage that you're going to be taking in game, right, a high armor class tends to trump resistance and lots of hit points. And that makes sense, right? Because at the end of the day, if you can avoid taking any damage, you're probably better off than only taking half damage, right? If you have resistance. Obviously, if you could get both, you should. But if we're prioritizing, armor class tends to trump. The second thing that I've learned when making these tank builds is that while most of the damage that you take in-game will come in the form of attacks against your armor class. Even a lot of spells will be attack rolls against your armor class, right? Which is why AC is so important. Completely ignoring save or take damage, type spells and abilities is a mistake, I think, when trying to determine a character's survivability, right? And that's probably obvious to many of you, but this was especially made really apparent to me when I did my anti-mage build. Oh boy, I'm getting all kinds of tags and cards today. Because the anti-mage was really, really good against spells, especially dex save type spells. So much better than any of the other tank builds that I'd done up to that point. I kind of went, oh boy, I better start thinking about this more and maybe adding an aspect of some sort of dexterity saving throw against spell damage when I'm crunching numbers to see how survivable these tank builds are, right? Now, some of you have argued that you've got to do more than just dexterity saving throw spells because there's all these other kinds of spells. And while that is true, I think if you look at spells that do damage, there are more that require a saving throw. There are more dex save spells than any other spell save type. Constitution, I believe, is a fairly close second, and if we're a respectable tank, we're going to have a pretty decent, Constitution save. And yes, there are other spells that do damage that require other saving throws. There's not a ton of them, and so, I'm trying to sort of get maybe the most common damage type that you may see that's going to require a saving throw. That's why I'm using Dex. And sure, it's important for us to be able to resist mind control abilities and charm abilities and all these other kinds of things that might require a wisdom save or a charisma save or something like that. But At the same time, I don't know why a tank would necessarily need to be more resistant to those type of spells than, say, your high damage dealing characters. In fact, if it were up to me, I think I would probably rather that my hard to kill but doesn't really hit very hard necessarily character is the one that ends up getting charmed or mind controlled, and not the, super potent, lots of damage dealing character, personally. So anyway, besides the fact that the damage reports that I do already are a little bit long, especially for tanks, I don't want to make them any longer, so we're going to stick with dex saves. And yeah, here's the question. What if we could build a character that could get both a high armor class and could get resistance to most of the damage that you would be taking as a character? Would they be the best tank ever? Maybe, as long as, like I've said, they have a great way to draw enemy fire, protect their allies, and things like that. So that is going to be the goal with this character, to try and find a way to have both high armor class and resistance to a lot of the damage that you're going to be taking, which I really haven't been able to do so far. Okay, I'm almost done with the preamble. Let's talk about barbarians. I thought this was a rogue tank build. It is. Hold on. I'm almost done. Okay, so barbarian survivability would be amazing if they could get a really high dexterity and a really high constitution, right? Because barbarians have unarmored defense, which says that if you're not wearing armor, you can add your dexterity modifier and your constitution modifier to your armor class. Which means that if you could get those both up to a 20, then you would have a 20 AC, right? And you can use a shield, so you'd have a 22 AC. If you could get those ability scores up really high. That's not easy to do, but if you could, you'd be, you would have the highest armor class of any character, I think, outside of using sort of spells or magic armor or, other special abilities and things. So to be able to get to an armor class that high would be great, but you couple that with the fact that barbarians have such an easy time being resistant to most damage that you could take. I think, the easiest and best way to try and get both a high AC and resistance to lots of damage would be to try and go the barbarian route. Here's the problem. If you go with a high dexterity and high constitution barbarian, you're sacrificing your strength score, right? Your strength score is going to wither on the vine. And that means that your damage is going to be pretty paltry. Tank damage is already a little weak, but with barbarians, you don't benefit from rage or reckless attack unless you're making strength-based attacks, right? And, if your strength is a 14 and your dexterity is a 20, you'd be crazy not to be using finesse weapons in order to make your attacks. But then it sucks because you don't get to take advantage of rage. You don't get to take advantage of reckless attacks, right? The question then becomes, if we're going to go with a barbarian who has a high dex and a high con, we need to be using finesse weapons to make our attacks. And what character class takes best advantage of finesse weapons? Arguably, it's the rogue, right? Because of the sneak attack stuff. Also, what character class brings along with them some pretty nice tanky features? The rogue. Who brings a ton of combat utility while they're at it, with super high skill proficiencies, stealth, lockpicking, etc., that no respectable adventuring party should ever leave home without? The rogue. So, you want to be a rogue, but you want to be a tank. Well then, you're in the right place. And I'm sorry that it took us so long to get here. But I present episode 35, The Rogue Tank. Let's jump in. Okay, at level 1. For our class, even though we are going to be getting some barbarian levels, I want to start rogue. Starting as a level 1 rogue gives us a lot more skill proficiencies than barbarian would. And so if you want to function as the party's rogue, be scouting and stealthing and picking locks and disarming traps and things, which I assume that you do, or else why are you building a rogue? But you want to be a rogue and a tank, then we probably want to start rogue regardless, just because then we'll be able to get all of those important skill proficiencies that are so important to rogues. So stealth, perception, investigation, sleight of hand, etc. Proficiency with thieves' tools, well, you'd get that if you multi-classed. But anyway, you would only get one of those later if you started barbarian. Barbarians get medium armor proficiency, which would actually be nice for us at level 1, but we don't need that from barbarians because for our race, we are going mountain dwarf. I really, really want to get our constitution and dexterity up as quickly as possible, and nobody does it better than the mountain dwarf because they get +2 to 2 ability scores, right? Also, with mountain dwarf, you do get medium armor proficiency, which is great. Plus, you get medium armor proficiency, which will be nice for level 1 anyway, and we'll talk about that more in a second. So, for ability scores, point by assumption, as always. If you want to roll or something else, knock yourself out. But with point by, we're going to do 15 dex to start and a 15 constitution to start, and put our +2 into each of those. We'll be at 17 and 17, which I know it's an odd number and it bugs me too, but we'll fix it. So don't worry. You need to have at least a 13 strength in order to multi-class into barbarian. So let's go 14. So at least we get a +2. I kind of hate that. I really wish that we could use dexterity or strength, like you get 2 for fighters, but that probably wouldn't make a lot of sense thematically for barbs. It still bothers me. I wish that I could use that ability score for something else, but you can't have it all. For equipment, I'm going to recommend that you do the gold buy option, and that you buy the following: a rapier, a shield, thieves' tools, and then scale mail armor, maybe, if you can afford it. You actually might be broke because that all is fairly expensive when you put it all together. It's 100, I think it's over 100 gold. Hopefully your dungeon master isn't a real stickler about you having camping gear or clothes. If so, you might need to take out a loan. Or you could potentially forego the scale mail. We'd really only be using it at level 1. So if you're fairly confident that you're going to be able to survive until level 2 without, too much trouble, you could probably do without. But anyway, at level 1, rogues get expertise, right? And expertise is great. It lets you, if you're proficient in a skill, it lets you double your proficiency bonus for 2 skills. I like to take stealth and then our thieves tool proficiency. I guess it doesn't have to be a skill. It can be a skill or your proficiency with thieves tools. Those seem to be, to me, the most important for being roguey. But with your fairly low wisdom score, you might want to take perception for now. Instead of, I guess, maybe stealth, because you'll probably have a pretty good stealth score. That way, you can kind of make sure you'll actually find those traps that you're going to be needing to disarm. You get Thieves' Cant as a level 1 rogue, which is kind of the language of rogues, and it's can be nice for some roleplay and utility purposes. And then, of course, you get the Sneak Attack, which says that once per turn, when we hit an enemy with a finesse weapon, we can do extra damage as long as we either have advantage on the attack or the enemy that we're attacking is standing within 5 feet of one of our allies, basically. So make sure that you're doing that when you're taking those attacks, and you get an extra, for now, 1d6 of damage once per turn when you hit with a finesse weapon. Okay, at level 2. We are a barbarian 1, so the reality is rogues by themselves don't actually bring a lot to the tank table, right? They have a couple of abilities that are nice for survivability. We'll get them later. But the barbarian has better survivability, and they have better ways to help us protect our allies. So we're taking some barb levels here early to help us be a better tank. So that means something about our character. Something has happened to our character to, at least momentarily, abandon their roguish ways and embrace the ferocious barbarian within. Specifically, I think something has made them want to look into their own past, their own history, into their genealogy. So maybe they had a visit from one of their barbarian ancestors. who have given them a quest to leave behind their petty thieving and seek to do more with their lives, to protect those who cannot protect themselves, perhaps, which was a heritage from their barbarian clan. I don't know. You need to figure it out. But at barbarian level 1, we get a couple of very important things. So we get to rage. All right. Twice per long rest right now, as a bonus action, we can start to rage, and it gives us a bunch of things. Most importantly for us, it gives us resistance to slashing, piercing, and bludgeoning damage. And that's one of the main reasons why we're here. That's fantastic. And again, it doesn't have to, it can be magical bludgeoning, slashing, or piercing damage. And most of the damage that most characters in most D&D campaigns take is going to come in the form of bludgeoning, slashing, or piercing damage, right? Not all, of course, but this is really important. Now, the thing that I probably hate the most about this build is, like I've mentioned, one benefit from Rage is that when you make strength-based attacks, you get to do extra damage per attack. We are not making strength-based attacks. There's nothing that says, and I've done this before in the Rogue Cleric team-up build, the battery and the blender, right? You could make strength-based attacks with a finesse weapon. There's no reason why you couldn't, get rage damage from that rapier if you were using strength to make the attack. But of course, as we've said, our dexterity is much higher than our strength. We're just going to be better off using our dexterity, which means we're just not going to get that rage bonus damage. And I know, believe me, it hurts. It hurts me as much as it hurts you, or maybe more. A couple other things about rage. Remember, you need to make an attack every turn or take damage every turn in order to maintain your rage. Otherwise, you lose it. And then, of course, there is one other really big drawback to rage, which is that you cannot concentrate on spells nor cast them. And if you do, you will lose your rage. And that actually is a big bummer, because there are lots of great ways to bump our survivability through spells that we're just not going to get to do for the most part. Okay, the other great thing about Barbarian 1 is unarmored defense. So another main reason that we're here, like I've already mentioned, you get to add your Constitution and your Dexterity modifier to your armor class if you're not wearing any armor, right? And unlike monks, who also get the unarmored defense ability, we get to use a shield while we're doing it. So right now that is, +3 for our dex, +3 for our con, +2 for our shield. So we're at 18 armor class if we're unarmored, right? And that's the same as if we would have been using scale mail plus our dex plus our shield. So might as well go naked. So sell that armor if you bought it in the first place, or maybe just don't buy it in the first place, like I mentioned. All right, at level 3, we are a Barbarian 2, and we get a couple of nice things. Well, one nice thing and one sad thing. The sad thing is Reckless Attack. So for most damage-focused builds that take Barbarian levels, this is one of my favorite abilities in the game. It's just great for damage. For tank-focused builds, not so much. With Reckless Attack, you get to decide at the beginning of your turn that you're going to attack recklessly, and you would thereby get advantage on all of the attacks that you make that turn, as long as they're strength-based attacks, and ours aren't. So we're really not going to be using this. Of course, there was a downside too, right? And an important downside, and that was that when you were attacking recklessly, enemies had advantage against you on their attacks. I argued when I made my Bear Totem Barbarian tank that one of the best ways to taunt your dungeon master or encourage them to attack you or the monsters was to give them advantage, give the monsters advantage when they attack you, right? And so in a way, using Reckless Attack if you're trying to be a tank was kind of good, because it's like, hey, hit me, you have advantage if you do. That is still true, although it's definitely not great for our survivability. And really the only thing that's better than giving enemies advantage when they attack you, if you're trying to encourage them to do so, is to give them disadvantage when they attack other people, right? That doesn't hurt your survivability, it just improves the survivability of your friends. And we will get that shortly. So for now, alas, we're going to need to find another way to get advantage if we want it. We will, eventually. But so that means, make sure, for the purpose of sneak attack damage, make sure that you're standing close to an ally so that you can get your sneak attack damage off. The other thing that barbarians get at level 2, danger sense, which is fantastic for tanking, actually. It gives you advantage on dexterity saving throws if you can see the thing that you're saving against. So whether it's a fireball or a spike trap or something, if you can see it coming, you get advantage on your dexterity saving throw, so that will be great for our survivability. At level 4, you're a barbarian 3. You now get 3 rages per long rest. Previously, you only got 2, and I know that probably meant you were having to pick and choose when you were going to rage, for which fight. I feel like 3 is a lot more sustainable. I know every table is different. Maybe my DMs are too soft on us. I don't know, but I don't hear about a lot of other tables where you're having a full-blown everyone roll for initiative, multiple enemy combat encounters more than 3 or 4 times per long rest. Am I crazy? Am I way off? I know what Wizards of the Coast official recommendation is as far as encounters, but I just don't see it a lot or hear about it a lot. So I don't know. I'd love to know in the comments, if you guys would let me know what you tend to see at your tables, if you think I'm way off. But 3, maybe 4, I think gets us through most of our combat encounters, if not all of our combat encounters in a day. So that's great and important. At level 3, barbarians get their subclass, their primal path. We're not going bear totem. I know, you probably thought I was, at least some of you, but no, we are going Ancestral Guardian. So I know that Bear Totem barbarians are the best at resisting almost every type of damage in the game, right? They get resistance to all damage while raging except psychic, and not just piercing, bludgeoning, slashing like other barbs. The reality is, I think, that the Ancestral Guardian is the best subclass at being a tank. Sure, they might take damage from a necrotic spell or weapon attack, I guess, even for that matter, or force damage, etc. But again, most of the damage that enemies deal in game is bludgeoning, slashing, or piercing, or comes against your armor class, right? And we're going to have a pretty good armor class. We're going to have great dexterity and constitution saves, and even advantage on, the dex saves at least. That means we will have great survivability against almost all the damage types almost all the damage that we'll be taking in the game. And again, there's more to being a great tank than just being hard to kill. Bear Totem, while great for, damage resistance, is not that great at being a tank otherwise, other than surviving, right? It just doesn't do a lot for protecting your allies unless you find ways to, add things to it, like I tried to do with the Bear Totem barbarian tank build I made. But if you can't protect your allies, then you're really only doing half your job, right? Ancestral Guardians are awesome. You get, at level 3, the Ancestral Protectors feature, which tells us this: spectral warriors appear when you rage. I wish I could couple this with like spirit guardians or something. We'd have a big ghostly rave. But anyway, when you're raging, the first creatures you hit with an attack on your turn, the first creature you hit with your attack on your turn becomes the target of these spectral warriors. And that therefore hinders your target's attacks until the start of your next turn. They have disadvantage on attacks against anyone but you. And this is the best: even if they do decide to attack somebody else and hit them despite their disadvantage, your ally that they hit has resistance to that attack. Doesn't matter what the damage type is, they have resistance. I mean, that's the best taunt in the game, I think, in my opinion anyway. I mean, sure, other classes, your armorer, your cavalier, might be able to impose disadvantage on multiple targets in a turn if they can hit multiple enemies with like extra attack or whatever, but disadvantage and resistance to an ally is amazing. Your allies are going to love you, or at least one of them once per round will love you. At level 5, you are a barbarian 4, and we get our first ability score increase or feat, and we're going to take the ability score increase option. We're going to bump our constitution by 1 and our dexterity by 1, therefore giving us an 18 in each, and we now have +2 to our AC, and we're at a 20 AC. That's awesome. I really wanted to take more rogue levels here, to tell you the truth, but I really wanted to bump my armor class by 2 even more. So there you have it. At level 6, we are a Barbarian 5, and we get extra attack. And again, I really wanted to take more rogue levels, but extra attack is just right. It's just right there. You just gotta reach out and take it. And so we're doing that. And it's great. I mean, it increases our damage, obviously, and that's important. But maybe more important than just the damage is, okay, we get another chance to land our sneak attack damage. So if we miss on one, maybe we'll hit on the second. But more important, another chance to land that all-important Ancestral Protector's debuff to an enemy, right? And so it's just too good to pass up. Had to take extra attack. So there we are at level 6, our very first damage report. Now, I'm going to try again. I haven't been doing, apparently, a very good job of explaining sort of my theory and reasoning behind how I do the damage reports for tank builds, based on all of the comments that I get about it. So again, I'm not trying to simulate an actual combat encounter. I'm just trying to calculate damage that you would take against a hypothetical round of combat against some made-up encounters. The encounters themselves are not particularly important. I'm not actually assuming that you're going to be fighting a dragon for 44 rounds or 5 earth elementals for 33 rounds, right? That's silly, and it wouldn't happen in game. It's hypothetical, and it's a way for us to say, okay, based on their plus hit and their damage dice versus your armor class, how much damage would they potentially do to you in a round of combat? And then at that rate of damage, how long would it take for you to die? So we have damage taken per round and rounds to die. Those are the two numbers, right? I know nobody's taking a meteor swarm to the face for 33 rounds. So anyway, not intended to actually simulate what you might face in game. The fact that you have limited resources and you're not going to be able to cast shield spell for 44 rounds is irrelevant. I'm just trying to calculate the average damage that you would take in a round, and then at that rate, how long would it take you to die? I hope that makes sense. I'm sure some of you are still gonna comment and tell me that it's unrealistic, and that's okay. I love you, and comments are great for the YouTube algorithm, so no complaints. Okay, so at level 6, we have 3 encounters, right, that we calculate numbers for. The first is a boss fight, and at level 6, that's a young white dragon. That young white dragon would do 9 damage per round to us. Our DTPR is 9, and our rounds to die would be 8 at that rate of damage. The typical kind of common regular encounter was against 4 berserkers, and the DTPR there is 6, and our rounds to die is 12. And then against a sort of never-ending hypothetical fireball that just hits us round after round, DTPR is 15 and RTD is 5. We'd be dead in 5 rounds. So it's pretty decent. It's about middle of the pack for most of those calculations compared to other tank builds, but it is about to get better. All right, at level 7, we're going Barbarian 6. I really wanted to take more rogue levels, but Ancestral Guardians level 6 is so good. It is so good, and it's just another really fantastic protect your allies ability that's important for us to be tanks, and it's just right there, just one more level. And plus, I just kind of, personally, I hate going back and forth if I'm going to multi-class, I want to just like take all my levels in the second class or whatever until I'm done with it, and then, move on or go back to my original class or whatever. It just feels a little janky for me from a storytelling perspective to kind of be going Barbarian, Rogue, Barbarian, Rogue. But, if you really want to do that, if your DM's okay with it, go for it, especially if you can come up with a great story reason for doing so. But anyway, at level 6, Ancestral Guardians get Spirit Shield, and it's fantastic. If you're raging and another creature that you can see within 30 feet of you takes damage, as a reaction, you can essentially absorb some of that damage for them, or I guess more accurately, your ancestors can absorb that damage. Why are you letting Grandpa take that great axe to the face, man? Respect your elders. Poor Gramps. Anyway, the Ancestral Guardians can absorb 2d6 of that damage, and this is fantastic, right? It doesn't require you to be next to your ally. It doesn't cost a resource other than your reaction. It's usable every single round. And I love the idea of like hitting an enemy with your attack, right? And now that enemy has disadvantage if they attack anyone other than you. But let's say they're just really determined to attack your squishy ally anyway. Often they're going to miss because of that disadvantage, but once in a while they hit, and your ally only takes half damage from the attack. And then, as a reaction, you throw out your reaction, and, Gramps takes an axe to the face and on your ally's behalf, and your ally's like, did I even get hit? Right? That I swear that axe was like coming right for me. That kind of tickled. Hee hee. Anyway, it's awesome. So also at level 6, we get 4 rages per long rest now, and I really think hopefully that should be enough to get all but, a few of us through the day's full combat encounters with a rage. At level 8, we are a rogue 2, so we're going back to rogue, and we're staying there for the rest of our lives. I think it's important that you figure out what it was that made you go back to your roguish ways here. Were you tasked to sort of take what you've learned by your ancestor and somehow apply it to your former profession? Did you maybe you became disillusioned with your ancestors discovering something that one of them did in their past that they tried to hide, and maybe that somehow brought shame or dishonor upon your family? I don't know. I would recommend figuring that out, but regardless, delaying rogue levels until now has been kind of tough, especially for our damage. Our damage has really suffered, and also it's hurt not to have a great reliable way to get advantage on our attacks to make sure that we, land that soft taunt, right? Fortunately, our tank stuff is golden, right? Our survivability is good. Our protection features are very good, and also I think even with just that single level of rogue that we started with, you've probably been able to function pretty well as the party's rogue thus far, right? You've got high dex, you've got proficiency in all the right skills, even expertise, and so you've been able to still be pretty stealthy, pretty sneaky, pretty disarming and lockpicky, and all of those things that you need to be as a good rogue. So, if you really wanted to start taking rogue levels sooner, you could. If you do so, I would suggest going like maybe rogue 1, then barb to 3, then back to rogue until level 3 of rogue, and then back to barb. Again, it gets a little janky, but that's probably what I would suggest. But as a rogue level 2, you get cunning action, which is great. It just lets you, as a bonus action, disengage or dash or hide, and that's going to be super useful for us. Occasionally, if we need to really get somewhere and don't want to take an opportunity attack, or it's far away and we need to dash, etc. So it's a nice to have. At level 9, you are a rogue 3. Sneak attack damage goes up to a 2d6. That's awesome. And then there's a new ability from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything called Steady Aim that I think we will be making liberal use of here. So until now, we haven't had a lot of use for our bonus action. That's a potentially kind of big weakness for this build, I think, up until this point. Now, you could, of course, if you're not super concerned about your own survivability, you could drop that shield and do 2-weapon fighting to maybe give you one more chance at landing that taunt and or sneak attack. Again, though, you'd have to use short swords instead of a rapier, right? Because those are light weapons and you don't have the dual wielder feat. So anyway, it could be nice, a little bit extra damage and another chance to make that all-important attack. But right now we have Steady Aim. So Steady Aim's great. We can't have moved this turn, and after we make our attack, our movement speed becomes 0. That seems a little harsh to me, actually. But anyway, you, as a bonus action, then you take aim, as it were, and make your next attack with advantage. So that's great. We have advantage now. It's going to really help both our damage and ensuring that we land that sneak attack, and soft taunt that we need, right? At level 3, rogues get their subclass as well, their roguish archetype. So, I'm going to recommend Arcane Trickster. What? 2 barbarian builds in a row that take spells? Yeah, I know, it's a little crazy, but I considered several. Swashbuckler, I think, is kind of nice because they get a taunt ability at level 9. The problem is it requires your action to use it, and it comes really late, and it's like our action is much better off being used to make an attack, because as an Ancestral Guardian, we're going to land that taunt anyway, right? And not only that, but the Swashbuckler's taunt depends on their charisma, so we'd have to sacrifice our dexterity or constitution, meaning a lower armor class and lower survivability, so I just don't think it works very well. I thought about actually the Phantom Rogue. I think that might be like my second favorite here. You know, you get some occasional extra damage against a second target. That's kind of nice. But then at 9th level, you get potentially advantage on Constitution saves. That in and of itself might have convinced me to go this route if it didn't come so late, right? Level 9 is going to be end game for us. If you feel really strongly about either of those or another rogue subclass for that matter, go for it. I think Arcane Trickster brings us the most benefit despite the fact that we can't cast or concentrate on spells while raging. So let's talk about that. First of all, as an Arcane Trickster, you get a cool feature, Mage Hand Legerdemain, or if you're French, Legerdemain. I don't know. You learn some cantrips, which we'll discuss in a sec, but then by default you have the Mage Hand spell, and I especially love how this allows you to pick locks and disarm traps with your thieves' tools from a distance using the Mage Hand. That's super cool and just fun and thematic. It potentially lets you stay safe, right, in a situation where you're maybe picking the lock on a chest that you fear might be trapped, but you couldn't detect any, but maybe it's going to explode, and if you're behind the corner or whatever, out of range, you can do it safely. That's great. It even lets you pick pockets from a distance, potentially, and you might not even get noticed, but if you do, you could feign innocence because you're standing 20 feet away, so like, wasn't me, dude, I don't know who's trying to pick your pocket. Could lead to lots of fun hijinks in game. Now we also get, like I said, 2 more cantrips and 3 first level spells, but all but one of those first level spells have to be from the enchantment or illusion school. So just like Spore Beast, oh boy, I'm probably out of cards. I think I only get 5 per video. You'll primarily want to focus on things that add nice utility or support that can be used outside of combat, right? Because you can't cast them while you're raging. For cantrips, I would absolutely take Message. I think it's such a great spell for rogues because you can sort of scout ahead, sneak ahead, see what's going on, and then quietly, telepathically message back to someone in your party what you're seeing, what's going on, without giving away your position and things. It's great. I do that because it's like, modern movies where you've got a headpiece, right? Anyway, and that's what I always do in game if I'm ever casting message, as though I had a headpiece. Other than that, for cantrips, take whatever looks most useful or fun. As for first level spells, I'd love to take False Life for our non-restricted spell, our non-illusion or enchantment spell, because it gives us temporary hit points and it doesn't require concentration. But I think I have to go with Find Familiar. We've discussed this spell a lot in previous builds, but we just get so much great utility from Find Familiar. It's really one of the most powerful level 1 spells in game, I think. You cast it, right, and then it lasts essentially forever until it gets killed or you dismiss it. You don't have to concentrate on it, and then you get a little pet, basically, that it can scout ahead for you. You can even essentially see through its eyes and hear through its ears and kind of control it and fly ahead and scout ahead into a dungeon or something like that. It's just really, really great. And of course, they can not attack, but they can take the help action on their turn, which comes right after yours in the initiative order, I think. Maybe they roll their own initiative. It's one of those two. I get confused sometimes. Anyway, That's fantastic, right? I recommend, as always, taking the owl. I think it's the most powerful of the familiars. They can fly, and of course they get the flyby feature, which lets them kind of swoop in, take the help action, and fly away, ideally, without provoking an opportunity attack, so it helps them stay alive. But also for this character, the owl is great because they have a +3 to their perception checks and advantage on perception checks that require sight and hearing anyway. And they might be better than you at detecting traps at this level. So that's pretty cool, actually, to have your owl be sort of the scout that is looking for traps. And then when they find them, they let you know and you go and disarm it or whatever. So if you don't need to move on your turn, I would say go ahead and bonus action, steady aim, and then you get advantage, right? And then have your familiar give advantage to one of your allies on their turn. If you really need to move for whatever reason, and keep in mind you can use your bonus action to dash or disengage now, but if you really need to move and you can't steady aim, go ahead and have the owl give you, or your familiar anyway, give you advantage, because it is so important that you land at least one attack per turn, both to get your sneak attack off, but also to land that soft taunt like we've talked about. As far as the other first level spells that you take that have to be illusion or enchantment, take whichever ones look the most fun or useful for you out of combat. I don't know, charm person, maybe disguise self. Just keep in mind that your intelligence score is really low, and so your spell DC is going to be pretty crap. And so try to look for things that you can use without depending too much on an enemy making a save against it, right? Or else it fails, kind of thing. That you can just cast and they just work. Damage report. Damage report for level 9. We have still a 20 armor class and 96 hit points, so that's significantly more. Our boss fight at level 9 was against a young blue dragon, and our DTPR against them would be 12, and it would take 8 rounds to die at that rate. The typical regular fight was against hobgoblin captains, and we would be taking 10 damage per round there, and our rounds to die would be 10. And then against a level 5 15 DC fireball that just hit us in the face every single turn, our DTPR is 19, and our rounds to die are 6. All right, at level 10, we are a rogue 4, and we get another ability score increase or feat. If you want better rogue skills and more damage, go dexterity. If you want more tankiness, generally speaking, go constitution. So you know which one I'm taking for this build, but either one is going to raise our armor class by 1. At level 11, we are a rogue 5, and our sneak attack goes up to 3d6. That's great. And we get uncanny dodge. I've been looking forward to this one, so it will be really nice for our survivability. Here's how it works. If you can see the attacker and they hit you, you can have the damage on that attack using your reaction, and yes, it stacks if you are resistant. So if you're resistant, you'd take half, and then uncanny dodge half again, so a quarter damage, right? Which is great. It doesn't have to be weapon damage. It doesn't have to be in melee range. They just have to be making a targeted attack against you. So no area of effect, saving throw abilities or spells. The biggest downside, of course, is that it uses our reaction to have that damage. So it's often going to force you to decide, do you help your friends or do you help yourself? Obviously, it's going to depend on how hard you're getting hit, on how close you or your friend are to dying. How hard are they going to get hit? Would you be absorbing, I like interesting decisions, so I don't hate the fact that this sort of is going to force us to be making a decision almost every round. It'll keep it interesting. But, for number crunching purposes, of course, I'm going to just assume that we are selfishly having our damage every time on one attack per turn. But of course, you will often be making a different decision than that in game, and you should. I think the general rule of thumb is if it's a massive hit against you, maybe if it's a big crit, and especially if it's not bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage, so you don't have resistance, probably use Uncanny Dodge. If it's a fairly moderate to weak attack against you, and or your ally is on the brink of death and or they're getting hit with a big hit, shrug off the attack against you and use your reaction for your Ancestral Guardian absorption, your grandpa absorption ability. Good old Gramps. At level 12, you are a Rogue 6, and you get another round of expertise. So you get to double your proficiency bonus on a couple more skills that you're proficient in. Assuming we took Stealth and Thieves' Tools last time, I'd probably go Perception and Sleight of Hand, maybe. Up to you, of course, but those are probably the most important for your rogue abilities and utilities. Maybe Investigation. Consider Investigation if your DM is the type that sort of requires you to make an investigation check to see if you can figure out how to disarm a trap, that kind of thing. Could be worth considering. At level 13, we are a Rogue 7, and our sneak attack damage has gone up to a 4d6. It's getting pretty good. And we get Evasion. Been waiting for this one. So really wanted to get this ability sooner, but I just felt it was more important, like I've said, in the name of being a good tank, to get those Ancestral Guardian Barbarian abilities. But this is a huge help for us against anything that requires a dexterity saving throw, right? If you're required to make a dex save to avoid damage, if you fail the dex save, you only take half damage. And if you make the dex save, you take no damage. And this is just going to take our survivability against dexterity-based attacks, or saving throws anyway, skyrocket, right? It's really good. Okay, also we get level 2 spells as an Arcane Trickster, level 7 here. Again, they both have to come from the Illusion or Enchantment School. There are some decent options. Mirror Image from the Illusion School. Doesn't require concentration, so you could cast it before the fight starts, and it would improve your survivability. You summon 3 images of yourself. Somebody targets you for an attack. You roll a die, and based on what you roll and how many images you have left, they might instead target one of the images. And if they hit it, they'll take it out. The problem I found with Mirror Image is that, I use it on my Blade Singer, and it's good, but it was a lot better at lower levels. Your Mirror Image armor class is only 10 plus your dex modifier, and it doesn't get any other benefits. So if your dex modifier is way higher, and once you get higher levels, it is, I'm thinking about my Blade Singer, then a lot of the times your mirror images are getting targeted and killed by things that wouldn't even have hit you had they attacked you instead of the mirror image. And that can be frustrating and make it feel like a little bit of a waste. Now, admittedly, you have a 21 armor class right now, which is good, but it's by no means unhittable. And so you probably would get some pretty decent mileage out of mirror image. So, I'd use it, try it out, and see if you like how it works in game. There are some other fun and useful options here, so again, take whatever looks best to you. Maybe invisibility would be a recommendation to give you advantage on a stealth check, or maybe more importantly, give advantage to an ally who doesn't have a great stealth check, or who's wearing heavy armor and has disadvantage. At least you cancel out that disadvantage with invisibility, right? So something to consider. Okay, we have, like I say, a 21 armor class and 145 hit points at this level. So damage report. At level 13, our boss fight here was against an adult white dragon, and that dragon would do 10 damage per round to us, and our rounds to die would be 15. Pretty tanky. A typical average fight was against 5 helmed horrors, and that was 14 damage per round they would do, and rounds to die is 11. And against a never-ending level 7 DC 16 fireball, we would take 4 damage per round on average, and it would take 37 rounds for us to die. So much better. We're so much better now, especially against those spells, but really against just about everything. We are pretty tanky. All right, at level 14, we are a rogue 8. At this point, I would consider sort of the core of the build pretty much finished. I thought about doing a third class, like War Mage would have been a great way to buff our armor class and or our saving throws, but it requires your reaction to use, and we've already got 2 great uses for our reaction, plus we would need a 13 intelligence to take wizard levels, and that means we'd have to sacrifice dexterity or constitution and therefore our armor class, and I didn't want to do it. Going fighter wouldn't have been terrible. We'd pick up a fighting style, though we couldn't get defensive fighting style because that only benefits you if you're wearing armor, and we're not. It doesn't work on just a shield. Even Jeremy Crawford said so. Action Surge, of course, is great. A fighter subclass could be really nice. I'm thinking maybe Battle Master or Rune Knight could be good. But in the end, I think we're just best served by picking up more ability score increases or feats, and adding to our sneak attack damage. So we're sticking with Rogue. At level 8 Rogue, another one of your spells doesn't have to be from the enchantment or illusion schools, so you could replace one. I don't actually have a really strong recommendation here. I think most of the best second level spells anyway have combat function and or require concentration. I think, in my opinion, my favorite might be Rope Trick, which would let you and up to 8 medium-sized companions climb up a little rope and then disappear into an extra dimensional space for an hour if you really needed a short rest, but you were worried about being exposed or discovered or ambushed while you tried to take one. There are others that offer some nice utility or support. So if you don't like Rope Trick, pick your favorite. But we do get another ability score increase or feat here, and so I'm going to say, max your dex. And so we've finally reached that promised land. It took us a while to get there, but we've got a 20 dex and a 20 constitution and a 22 armor class, and that's assuming we don't have a magical shield or anything else that's bumping our AC. So pretty good. All right, at level 15, we are a rogue 9. Our sneak attack has gone up to a 5d6, and we get a feature called Magical Ambush that doesn't really do a lot for us, unfortunately. So we're told when you're hidden from a creature and you cast a spell on it, it has disadvantage against any saving throw it might need to make against that spell. But again, with our really low intelligence score, they are probably going to succeed on a save, even with disadvantage, unless we're casting something that we're relatively sure they have a low save against. So I don't know, maybe you stealth up to a group of enemies that you're pretty sure have a fairly low wisdom score, and you cast Crown of Madness on one of them, which essentially lets you mind control that creature, and you just use your action to cause it to make attacks against its allies, essentially, round after round, and you just stay hidden and until the creature gets killed, right? And then you start the fight. That could be kind of a cool thing to do, but otherwise, I don't see a lot of utility coming from Magical Ambush. At level 16, we're a rogue 10, and we get another ability score increase or feat. I love getting another feat here. You could try to bump one of your lower ability scores, or maybe better yet, take the resilient feat that resilient wisdom, for example, that would then let you add your proficiency bonus to your wisdom saving throws. That could be really good. I think I probably go with tough here, the tough feat. That would give us 2 hit points per level, just flat hit points. And again, as a barbarian, every hit point is almost as good as 2. So 2 hit points per level feels more like 3 or 4 for another character, unless every enemy is attacking you with something other than piercing, bludgeoning, or slashing damage. At level 17, we are a rogue 11, and we get sneak attack up to 66, which is quite good. And then we get reliable attack talent, which is really great for our sort of roguishness and utility. So if we're proficient in a skill, when we make an ability check, we get to treat any roll of 9 or lower as a 10. So we're unlikely to ever fail a stealth, perception, sleight of hand, or lockpick again, right? And that's fantastic. All right, final damage report. At this level, we have a 22 armor class and 319 hit points, which is more than double what we had last check, so that's great. Against a boss fight of an adult red dragon, we have a 13 DTPR and 25 rounds to die. That's quite good. Against I think the typical average fight was against 5 earth elementals. DTPR was 23 and rounds to die 14. And then against a never-ending meteor swarm, which was devastating all of our other tanks, we were only taking 9 damage per round and surviving for 36 rounds. So, yeah, that's almost as good as the anti-mage for spell damage. So, very nice. Final thoughts. I feel like this might be the most well-rounded tank build that I've done to date. They're really pretty good against almost all of the damage that you would be taking in game. Not quite as good as the anti-mage against spells, but a million times better than the anti-mage against everything else. And then they were kind of middle of the pack against, the direct attack fights compared to the other tank builds that I've done so far. But way better than those other tank builds against spell damage, especially once you get evasion. You're better by a mile. So make sure to check the graphs that I post a link to in the video description if you want to compare them. You could argue, of course, that the Abjuration Wizard tank was way better against spells because they have Counterspell. But Counterspell won't always work. You could fail your check to counter the spell if the enemy is casting a higher level spell. You might not have the spell slot to cast it. You might have used your reaction, so you wouldn't be able to counterspell. And let's be honest. Some of those other tank builds that I've done have some superfluous survivability, right? Who needs to survive against 5 Helmed Horrors for 41 rounds? Let's at least keep it interesting, right? So, also, maybe most importantly, those other tank builds didn't get to be a freaking rogue, right? You're sneaking around, you're picking locks, you're disarming traps, you're ambushing enemies, you're scouting ahead, maybe even picking some pockets while you're at it, all while being incredibly hard to kill, doing some decent damage, thanks mostly to sneak attack, and just having a lot of great utility via our trickster spells, but above all, being great at protecting your allies, which is really why we're here, right? So that's the show for the week. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I would love to play this character in game personally, but I feel that way about every build that I create. So anyway, make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't. I love you guys. I think you're amazing, and thanks for watching. Hope you have a fantastic day, and as always, if you have a build that you would like me to do an episode on, feel free to leave some details about it in the comments, and I will add it to the list, and hopefully one day soon I will do my best to optimize it for you. Thanks guys. Take care. We'll see you soon.